Tom Gray here. I made myself a chair desk, a pivoting that pivots, articulates, and swings out of the way so that I can sit in my favorite chair while I'm doing my web surfing and my YouTubing and my marketplace searching. And I can sit my laptop on here. It's nice and firm, doesn't shake around, and it gets the laptop off my lap. And I don't know about you, but laptops, these latest versions of them are getting pretty heavy. So actually sitting them on your lap is not a long-term proposition, at least not for my old bones. So I'll show you how I made it. All right, materials to get started. I got a piece of plate here that gauges up at 14. That's going to be the base plate for the front and the base plate for the outrigger. Piece of 3/4 Schedule 40 pipe, made in USA, believe it or not. I was shocked when I read that. A piece of it's like stamped angle iron. It gauges up at 14. And then this piece of old office furniture, which gauges up at 11. I picked it out of a bunch of junk. Office furniture was being thrown away. I don't really know what it is. Dentist office a couple blocks from me was redecorating or something, and they threw away a whole bunch of office furniture. Use with products heavier than the maximum indicated weight may result in instability and possible injury. Good to know. Okay, so I don't really know what that is, but it's nice heavy 11 gauge, like a hat channel sorta. Nice and strong. This is going to be our table support. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the base plate and the outrigger base to size. Okay, now I'm going to cut the threaded end off one end of this pipe for the upright, and I'll cut it to length later, but right now I'll just whack off that one end so I can weld it to the base. Here we are with the actual chair. So front mounting pad, outrigger mounting pad, the post just kind of standing there, balanced there. Me sitting in the chair. Okay, I think this is gonna work. Tack this together, and we'll see what we can do to make that adjustable in case I want to use it with a different chair. Before I do any cutting and welding, I'm gonna clean up the surfaces with a face-off disc. Here we are back at our mock-up with a similar piece of this angle iron. This stuff is perforated every couple inches. So to make it adjustable, I can use these holes that are already here. So marking this one similar to where I'm going to cut this one right here. When I cut it, and then I tack it together so it's in a position like that. That covers a 34-inch chair, and that hole will align to that hole, that one to that one, that one to that one. So plenty of places to put in some bolts to hold the outrigger in place. Then if I want to shorten it, since these are going to nest, I can shorten it so that mark comes up to the edge of that that piece of 14 gauge, or to the tube if I nest it inside, which would mean I can shorten it right to about there in the worst case. And that's a chair that's going to say roughly 26 inches on the side. And then as narrow as that, which is a chair that would be 20 inches on the side. That'd be a pretty small chair, so I think that'll cover my range. So I'm going to cut this shy of this hole and set it up so that the back piece nests inside the front piece of the outrigger. I'm going to drill a couple holes in this outrigger for some plug welds. I goofed up my first positioning, so I'm going to knock those tacks off. All is forgiven. Okay, back down on the floor. So here's the stanchion. Here's the front base pad. Here's the outrigger. And here's the outrigger extension. So I'm going to put a piece of 14 gauge on between the outrigger extension and the rear base plate so that the angle is level. Not that that's a huge deal, but just some OCD. And then you can see how the holes will match. So I can keep sliding this forward, sliding this forward, sliding this forward. So I'm going to cut this outrigger piece off right about there. Here's the outrigger pad. Here's the outrigger extension. So I'm going to double up the end mounting of the extension onto the outrigger pad so that the outrigger itself can slide smoothly underneath this extension. So I'm going to tack this together. Alright, here we are back at the chair, and here's our mock-up assembled. Outrigger and extension with a little spacer on it. I dressed up the corners a little bit. The front mount pad, and because of our spacer, the outrigger's not touching the floor, so the Organic Yellow Onions label slides under nicely. Okay, so we can finish weld this piece, and I can gusset up the stanchion mount. Now that everything fits, I'm going to I cut up some little gussets just out of scraps, and I'm just gonna tack those in place and finish weld everything. Alright, here we are back at the chair, getting everything into the shot here. There's the welded up base piece, all the gussets on it. It's not ground yet, but you can see the outrigger just resting on the floor. When I push backwards on the pipe, on the stanchion, it's nice and stiff. But when I push sideways, it ain't so stiff. So I think I'm going to put a front rigger across that way to increase the stability side to side. And there's the front rigger. Same process. I did it all off camera, but same exact process as making the outrigger. So here we are. So pulling back on the upright, nice and stiff. Pushing left and right on the upright, front and back, left and right, and I'm tugging on it pretty good. That is much better. Right, I'm going to finish weld all that, and then it's going to be on to making the table part. To make the table pivot, I'm going to use this piece of 1-inch pipe. Now, 1-inch pipe just about fits over a 3/4 pipe, a little bit small. So to expand it, I'm going to slice it lengthwise, and normal pipe has got a weld seam on the inside. I think you can see it there. So I'm going to slit it on the weld seam, and then that should allow it to spring open a little bit, and I should be able to get it over the 3/4 pipe. Seam is right about there. Now I'm going to cut it off with my one of my oldest tools, old rigid tubing cutter. To deburr the inside of the cut, I'm just going to use a rat tail file. Just taking a couple of pry bars and easing this open a little bit. This is a piece of 3/4. Looking down on the chair, we want the table surface to be centered over the seat of the chair. So using some biometric measurements and the length of this strut member that I garbage picked, it looks like right about there, 22 or so inches ought to do that. Turns out the dimension I need is right about there. So I'm going to scribe the circumference of the pivot member. To create a tensioning device to lock the pivot, I'm going to weld a piece of 1/4-inch pipe like that so I can put a knob. This knob I also found in the same trash haul as the office furniture here. And I'll slit it and then run a bolt through it, and that'll be my tensioning device. I need a stop collar to keep the pivot from sliding down the stanchion pole. So I think what I'm going to do is take another piece of this 1 inch, maybe I'll cut off 1 inch of it or so, and maybe I can open this up enough with a grinder, with a die grinder, to allow it to slip over the 3/4 and put a set screw in it. A little bit of what Div might call forest engineering. And here we are all assembled. Here's the stop collar. I can adjust the height with that. I'll get a proper set screw. And then here's the pivot. And we can lock the pivot angle with that. I'll put that knob on there. So now I need a table platform. And that's a woodworking project. And I need to finish weld this arm. Came across this in the dentist's office garbage, office furniture garbage. So I'm going to use it instead of a set screw. But it's an M6 thread, so I'll just weld. I don't have an M6 tap, but I do have an M6 nut, so I'll just weld a little nut on there. All right, back at the chair, here is the welded up table support arm. Now to get I need a wooden surface for the tabletop, so I'm going to use plywood. This piece of scrap is roughly half the size of my tabletop, which is going to be 24 by 14. This one's 12 by 14. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of this slot in the piece of office furniture and this slot. So I'm going to attach a piece of angle iron, which is currently, or bent sheet metal, which is currently simulated by this piece of 6-pack, Pacifico 6-pack. And I'm going to take advantage of this oblong hole. So I'm going to attach the pivot basically in the center of the table. So I'm going to hold that with my thumb and forefinger. And then as it pivots, you can see that that oblong hole stays engaged. So that the tabletop is moving straight forward and straight backwards. And that oblong hole is providing the take-up for the difference in radius as we pivot. So a simple thumb nut or wing nut or something here can provide the lock, and a simple pivot over here can provide the pivot. Now I don't like attaching stuff directly to plywood, so I'm going to use a piece of sheet metal with a dimple in it. In fact, I think I'm going to use this piece right here, which is a demonstration piece from one of my earlier videos on my dimple die, as a way to create a pivot, and I'll drill a bunch of holes in here to attach it to the plywood. That way I get to spread the load out on the plywood with a bunch of little holes instead of one big hole, which tends to tear out. So I don't like to load wood, point load wood. It doesn't have the durability. So I'm going to use this steel to spread that load out. Found this scrap. Looks just about perfect. It's a wee bit long, which is unusual. Usually they're too short. But I'm going to bend a little piece of angle out of it. It's 18 gauge, plenty strong for what we're doing. And here's the pivot plate. I just took that piece of sheet metal, cut it down, popped a bunch of little holes in it for wood screws to hold it to the plywood, and put a square hole in the, wrong way, in the dimple to hold a carriage bolt. And there's our pivot. Okay, time for a little wood dogging. Here's our plywood for the top. This piece is our top of our desk, and I'm just going to buzz it out with my little skill saw. To mount the center pivot, I'm going to do the X thing, corner to corner on the non-appearance side of the plywood. And I'm just going to put an indentation there for the head of the carriage bolt and just attach this with a couple of screws for now. Drilling some holes in our little piece of angle to mount it to the side of the plywood. So here we are assembled. So we just loosen that. That'll be a knob, but we just loosen this screw. We can pivot the table and change the angle very easily, and then retighten it. So here we are on the weld table, and the tabletop has got a little bit too much deflection in it for me, about maybe 3/8 or 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to put a stabilizer underneath it. For the stabilizer, I've got this piece of 1/4 inch scrap. It's got a bunch of goofy saw cuts in it, but I think I'm going to use it since this is going to face up. Nobody will ever see it. I'll just weld it on right here, and then I'll chop it to length once I get it to pivot. Okay, that's much better. Now I'm just going to cut it to length by pivoting the table, marking the extremities, and cutting it off. To create a slot for the adjustment bolt so it stays engaged, I'm going to just fashion a little slot, the other side of the slot out of this piece of 18 gauge, I'll just do that with a pair of hand snips. It's going to look like that. And here it is, clamped in place. Little tiny gap, so the weld has got somewhere to go. Now that the table fittings are all done, I'm going to cut off the stabilizer so it's never exposed, and just start grinding and polishing up welds and a lot of sanding and all that. Since I don't know what height chair I'm going to end up using this with long term, I'm just going to knock the threads and like another inch off the stanchion. I can always cut it down later, or maybe I'll find something I like about having it this tall. Okay, for the metal parts, I'm going to try this hammered black finish paint. For the top, I'm just using Minwax tongue oil, nothing fancy. Just the only thing I do is I seal the edges first, let them sit, give them a second coat, and then do the top, because the exposed plies tend to drink up a lot of this stuff. Alright, welcome back to the floor. Time for final assembly. To mount the table, I'm going to put a Mylar washer, a little spacer washer that I need, and another Mylar washer, and then thread the carriage bolt through there. And then I found another one of these knobs in the trash haul from the dentist's office. Found two of them actually, so I'm going to use that to tighten up the pivot underneath. Kind of hard to show you that, but this will work. A little wing nut. So one more time. Thread that carriage bolt up. And fumble the wing nut all over the place. There. There we go. Alright, here goes the modeling chute starring me. So, I sit down, make myself comfortable, pull the table on over, snug it in place. I can put my laptop right here, my notepad, and I can do my marketplace searching and my YouTubing. Well, this turned out pretty good. I'm happy with the result. I can hardly wait to start using it. Get the laptop off my lap. Looks good. Wife even made a comment that she likes the finish. So I'm going to call this one done. And it's on to the next project. I will see you there and then.